Another thing I want to talk about here as far as peer-to-peer communication is the names that we give the data information as it traverses from one host to another host. Now at the very bottom at the physical layer, we're again talking about bits. We're talking about binary ones and zeros. As we take those bits and we convert it into something that's readable and hand it to our layer 2 devices, at that time we're going to call it a packet. Well, we call everything a packet, right? But if you take Cisco tests, which some of you might be doing, Cisco is specifically going to call it a frame. Layer 2 information, when talking from one layer 2 host to another layer 2 host, we're talking about frames. So Ethernet frames or frame relay frames or other types of layer 2 devices talking to each other would typically refer to as frames. Now, it's not always frames. If you're talking about technologies like ATM, it might be a cell. But for the most part, frames are what you'll be asked from Cisco. Now, I may be guilty of referring to everything as a packet. Kind of got that from other pioneers of the data networking world like Radia Perlman. Radia Perlman wrote several really important protocols and has great books on things like, she has a book called Interconnections, which I recommend everybody go get. But maybe not yet in your course curriculum. Might want to go through this first and then maybe into the CCNP realm before you start poking at that book. But she refers to everything as packets. But from a Cisco perspective, and that's really what we're all here for, to eventually get the personal branding of a CCENT, Cisco is going to refer to the communication at layer 2 as frames. Then you get to layer 3, now everything's a packet. So router to router communication, we're talking about IP packets. Above that, when we're communicating at layer 4, TCP or UDP based conversation, those are going to be segments. So again, to go from the bottom up, physical, data link, network, and transport layer, we're talking about bits, frames, packets, and segments. Very important you memorize this. It'll be an easy test question when you get there. As I mentioned, we were going to make a reference from the OSI reference model to the TCP/IP layer-based model. Now, if you take a look at the TCP/IP model, you see that it's broken out into 4 layers. We have the network access layer, which combines layer 1 and layer 2. Then we have layer 3, the network layer. We have the transport layer, and then we have the application layer, which would combine layers 5, 6, and 7. So of those layers there, again, it's a 4-layer model, but I usually don't break it out 4-layer model like they show in the slide. This is actually TCP's model. What I usually do is I map it more like this. I break out the data link and physical layers, the network access layer, because when I'm talking about layer 2 devices, I'm really talking about data link type devices like a switch on your network. So layer 2 is broken out specifically just like it is in the OSI reference model. So physical, data link, network, and transport we focus on, and we focus on those heavily inside of your Cisco training. So specifically, if I'm talking about layer 2 devices, usually I'm talking about an Ethernet switch. If I'm talking about a layer 3 device, I'm talking about a router-to-router communication. And when I'm talking about layer 4 communication, we're talking about host-to-host based communication using TCP or UDP segments. All right, and anything above that, we'll leave that to the application developers and they can figure it out. One of the nice things I really like about being in the Cisco realm of things and being a network engineer is the fact that from a support perspective, you gain an advantage over your peers in the IT world. And the advantage you gain is you are one step removed from the end user. Typically, the job of a network engineer, as you start going farther and farther in your career in network engineering, is you discover one really neat fact about this job. And that is you're going to be supporting the server admins of the network. You're no longer talking to end users on a day-to-day basis. You're talking to the people that need to get the users talking to their servers. So you're communicating usually with the network admins and other people in the network that are a lot easier for IT folks to talk to. So the stress of dealing with and changing everything into layman's terms that we usually have to do and communicate with end users is a big advantage of being in the the network side of the house and just doing and dealing with network equipment from a day-to-day basis. So let the other folks deal with the application layer. We're just going to focus on the bottom 4 layers of this stack here and make sure that the network operates as expected.